Hello. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Happy Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in to the KTAL News Now Digital Streaming Center. So, today, as you can see, I have a very special guest with us today. Lynn Vance joins us in the Digital Center because we're going to be talking about something really interesting that she's been able to get a firsthand look at it. We are talking about the Hurricane Chris trial. Hey, Lynn Vance, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me.
For sure, yeah, no. This is going to be really interesting because Lynn was able to kind of get the tail end of this trial. So she is going to be providing us with the details in regards to the jury listening into those final arguments from the prosecution, from the defense, and then those minutes leading up to hearing the verdict. So we are going to go ahead and dive in, but let's give a little background on who exactly is Hurricane Chris for those individuals out there who don't know. Who's Hurricane Chris, Lynn?
Okay, so Hurricane Chris signed a major label record deal back in 2007, so it's been a while ago. He had a hit single. It was called Hey Baby or A Baby, I believe. But he's done other music, just not as popular or as mainstream. Let me say that because it's probably popular to his fans. So that's how he kind of came about. And then also, Brittany, I don't know the specific year. It was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. His song went viral on TikTok because they were using it in some kind of TikTok challenge where they did these dance moves. So it kind of had a resurgence again. You know how that happens with songs. So yeah, that's basically who Hurricane Chris is. A rapper. Was born and raised here in Shreveport, and so yeah, he made it out, got a record deal, and he does come back to Shreveport from time to time. Of course, the incident that we're going to talk about happened here in Shreveport. I don't think he lives here in Shreveport, but his family still lives here. His mother still lives here.
Okay, all right. And so there's that background there a little bit about Chris. We're just going to refer to him as Chris moving
Yeah,
forward.
that'll be easy.
Yeah. And then so the other individual involved in this case, could you tell us a little bit about that individual as well?
Okay, so the deceased person was Denzeria Ferris. Um, I don't know that much about him. When they did the closing arguments, they didn't really delve into too much of who he was as a person. Um, so I really can't talk about that. I can go into specifics about how they when they argued the closing arguments of how they described him, but as just an everyday person, they really did not go into what kind of job he had. I heard nothing about if he had any kids. His aunt and his mother were in the courtroom. I did speak to his aunt briefly, and she basically told me that it really didn't matter whether Chris was found guilty or not guilty because their loved one, is gone now and will never come back. So it's like neither one's a win for them, but they were hoping for a guilty verdict.
And so, as you were there in those kind of final days, could you tell us anything about maybe some of the arguments from um, both the prosecution or the defense's side? Any interesting tidbits that you heard in regards to the arguments that they were providing?
Sure. Let's start out with the wait. Hold on. Let me get my
Yes,
notes in order,
get the
y'all.
notes, get the notes.
Let me get my notes in order. But the first ones to get up and do their closing arguments was the prosecution. So let's start with some of the things that they went over. First, they asked the jury to not make this about Chris's celebrity. That in this trial, Chris is just a citizen of Shreveport and Cattle Parish and a defendant in this case, right? So don't make it about celebrity. They also said that it was brought up in their trial that Mr. Ferris was portrayed as a villain But they said Mr. Ferris was not a villain and Chris was not a hero. That was what they told the jury. They said that Chris shot Mr. Ferris. He actually fired at him 10 times, but he hit Mr. Ferris 6 times. Now, 3 of those bullets stayed in his body, and 3 of the other bullets passed through his body.
And that is what the prosecution argued?
Yes, that's what they were telling the jury. They also said that there were some witnesses there. They were trying to determine what Mr. Ferris was saying to Chris, right? But the witnesses that they had, they were saying that these witnesses, they didn't hear him threaten Chris. They just said they heard Mr. Ferris mumbling. So they made that point. And then they also, Brittany, tried to, I guess, put reasonable doubt into the minds of the jury with just anything they could, basically, because they said that Chris said that he went to the Texaco that night to get snacks, but he never purchased any snacks, never bought anything. They also tried to bring up that Chris actually ran into some friends at the Texaco, is what he says. But they were saying, was it a coincidence? Did he really just run into these friends, or were they meeting up there for something? They also said that found in Chris's car was an AR. They just kept calling it an AR. I know that that's some kind of gun, Brittany. I don't know, if it's an AR what.
Yeah.
But in court, they just kept calling it AR. So there was an AR in his car. Chris had a backpack with $10,000 cash in it, in the car. And let's see.
And so Chris, I don't know if we kind of touched on this, but the original charge was that he had the illegal possession of a stolen Mercedes, but then
Yes.
but you're saying that they also found the gun on him.
And they did argue about the Mercedes. Now, here's what the prosecution said about the Mercedes. The Mercedes was owned by what they called Chris's common law wife, or I don't know, girlfriend, basically. And they're saying that, I'm sorry, so I'm just going to tell you what the prosecution said. So this is how they argued it.
Mm-hmm.
She said, and I'm going to use Brittany for an example, but she said one of her colleagues. She said, if Brittany was purchasing a home and I just wanted to give her money to put down on her own home, I could do that. But that doesn't give me a financial claim to her home. Now, if I knew all of Brittany's information to put insurance on her home, I could do that without even asking her. You can do that. But that doesn't give me a claim to her home. Because the argument with the Mercedes was that Chris put a down payment on the car and that he was paying the insurance on the car. The car was not in his name. So, prosecution's trying to argue that it's semantics. All that doesn't matter. It wasn't legally his car, and by the law, it wasn't his car. So that was their argument about the car. Now, they also kind of talked about Chris giving conflicting statements. The first statement in the back of the police car was different, or a little different from the statement that he gave at the police station. So they tried to, Brittany, say, hey, they didn't really match up,
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see, they're trying to put any kind of doubt in the juror's mind. I mean, that's their job, right?
Mm-hmm.
They said that Chris had no reason to shoot the Mr. Ferris, because Chris was on the other side of his car when Mr. Ferris opened the door. That's what triggered the whole incident. Mr. Ferris opened Chris's car door. Chris jumps out of his friend's car next to them, is on the passenger side standing up of his car, says something to Mr. Ferris, then runs around. They showed the video several times in court. He runs around the car. He puts the gun basically to Mr. Ferris's head. and there's an exchange between them. I don't know, maybe 2 minutes it seemed like. Um, there was no audio, so we couldn't hear what was going on. But they were basically saying that you do not have the right to defend your property with deadly force, right? You can defend your life with deadly force, but you cannot defend your property. And then they went so far as to say, and technically, even if you could defend your property, it wasn't his property. It wasn't his car,
Technically, yeah.
So that's how they were. That's how they were trying to argue it.
Mm-hmm.
It was really interesting. Just a quick note, just to be totally transparent. This was like my first court case to cover, so it was quite fascinating
Mm-hmm.
to watch the whole thing play out.
Yeah, definitely those little tidbits that you would never think of, like the way that individuals in the courtroom have to stand for the jury,
Yeah.
have to stand for the judge. If you're
Yes.
experiencing that all for the first time, as I have recently for the first time as well, you definitely are taken aback almost to like, oh, this, I don't want to compare it, but it almost like feels like a movie. You're like, oh, this is how it's really done, though.
One thing that I was not expecting, and parental advisory to the audience watching, but
PG-13.
they did show, yeah, but they did show Mr. Ferris pass away, basically,
that
in
is
the
sad.
video.
That is very sad.
And I guess for them, it was important for the jury to see that someone lost their life. But it was, I won't say disturbing, but it was to watch it. Yeah, it was like,
It's tough.
okay, yeah,
That's
it was
definitely tough
kinda
stuff.
rough.
And yeah, the things that they do talk about and show in trials like that is very emotionally impacting and difficult to see sometimes. But the jury, that's what they do for the jury, to see all those difficult things, because it just shows the importance of the decision that they eventually have to make. That is very important.
Yeah.
And then so on the defense side,
Okay.
did they have anything to come back on, or?
Oh yes, the
Yeah.
defense. I would say, pretty colorful in the way they defended Chris. So first of all, I don't know his specific stats, but Chris is not a large individual, and his defense team argued that Ferris was 6'1" and 200 pounds. That he was a bigger guy. They also talked about, just like the prosecution, that this is not about, Chris being famous, that he should not be convicted because he's a celebrity. And then they also tried to put into the juror's mind, what if this was your grandfather that encountered this incident and maybe was scared for his life and shot this individual, okay? And so that was like one scenario. But they took it a little even further and said, what if it was a teenage girl whose father had taught her to try to defend herself no matter what happens, and had took her to the gun range and had her trained, and wanted her to defend herself, and that she encountered this individual. If she was scared for her life and she shot him, I think what they were trying to show, Brittany, is that it's really hard to say when someone's scared. You know what I mean? If you're scared for your life, I may be scared for my life maybe faster than you would be. Who knows?
Is that what they were explicitly trying to argue?
Now look, I'm not going to say, but let's just keep going with the points that they said.
Okay, yeah.
So let me not say what I think, but they were saying, what if it was a girl? What if it was a grandfather? Okay. They also pointed out that Chris was just trying to stop this individual. He was not trying to kill him. They said that all of the shots that Chris fired were into the lower body. Now, in the video, I will say that in the video, Chris has the gun pointed at Mr. Ferris's head. But, when he ended up shooting him, they were all waist or lower.
Waist. Okay.
Okay, so they were trying to point out, if he wanted to just kill Mr. Ferris, he would have just shot him in the head, basically. That's what they said. They said he didn't. All the shots were lower. They also said that they asked the jury not to convict him for being a celebrity. They also pointed out that Chris has no record. Chris has never had a felony. He's never, served any time for anything. So it's a clean record. And they also said that the police work was sloppy. That the police were more concerned about Chris being a celebrity and they were just excited. Even stating that one police officer made a statement when they arrested Chris that, oh, I got to put my handcuffs on my first celebrity.
Was that all captured in the body cam video?
I'm not sure. This is just what the defense
Was
is saying.
Okay.
So that this could have been gathered from witnesses because during the week they did call in witnesses, and they are under oath, so they have to tell the truth. So I wasn't there for that part, so they're just recapping what happened during the week. They also said that the police on the scene were just really excited, that some of them were talking about the song "Ay Baby," and that he's pretty sure that they would have relayed that back to the detectives, and so the detectives would have known exactly who this was. Now, the defense said, because one of the arguments was that when Chris ran around the car and held the gun to Mr. Ferris's head, that he was just saying, "Get away from my car, get away from my car," and Mr. Ferris went to reach in his pocket. This is what the defense is saying. And Chris thought he was going for a gun, so that's why he shot him, right? Chris actually said in one of his statements that he asked him, "Take your hands out of your pocket, take your hands out of your pocket." The EMS workers testified that what was actually in Miss Ferris's pocket were two, and they had them in court, Brittany. There were two large, like, chunks of concrete, very heavy. When the defense attorneys put them on the evidence table, they actually made a dramatic point to put them down heavily. They made a loud noise, when they put them down. And so what the defense is trying to say is basically that could be a deadly weapon. Let's see, what else did they say?
Yeah, I'm sure they did for almost for dramatic effect, like make it a point to slam them on the table and stuff like that. I mean, yeah.
And then the defense, in wrapping up what the defense did, they just basically asked the jury to do the right thing. That they, as the defense, did not have the burden to prove that Chris is innocent. They said it's the prosecution that has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Chris is guilty. So they were saying Chris is innocent. He's an innocent person until or if you guys find him guilty. So keep that in mind, And they also mentioned and played at the end of Chris in the back of the police car saying that he has a 7-year-old child, so they kind of put that out there for the jury also, so yeah, that was
okay. Yeah. No, that's all very interesting for a lot of us who didn't get the chance to be in that courtroom. I appreciate you, even to the smallest detail of the fact that Mr. Ferris had the kind of the rocks, the concrete in his pocket. That's something nobody would really know, and how they kind of showcase that to the jury by slamming that on the desk, all those little details. So thank you so much, Lynn, for giving us that inside look. And when we continue to ask you questions and provide the description of what this courtroom looked like, can you tell us about, maybe how many people were there? Was there a big turnout, or were a lot of people interested in this case, in this trial?
Yeah, Brittany. So let me just tell you, the courtroom was packed. There were actually some people that got up and left to make room for other people, because several of the people in the courtroom, I found out through the course of being there, were law students who were interested in the case. One person that I talked to said, I'm just being nosy, it's Hurricane Chris. Mr. Ferris's family members were on the second row. Chris's family members and his current girlfriend were on the first row. And then the rest of us were on the rows back. There were other media members there. Yeah, it was packed. It was a packed courtroom.
Okay.
And it was very interesting that when they would have the recesses, interesting for me because it was my first time in court. It was interesting that I would go out into the hallway. There was like a little common area that had some seats, and I would sit down to update you guys back here at the station on what was going on. And yeah, so Hurricane Chris and his attorney, they would just walk right by and smile and like, hey, and just keep going.
Say hello. Yeah.
Yeah, just being like normal people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this can happen.
I will say that there are a lot of rules in court.
For sure.
So for you people watching, if you're curious about why we never get any video in the courtroom, we're not allowed. We're actually not allowed to shoot video at all inside the building. Any interviews that we do have to be done outside of the building. So also just from a reporter standpoint, trying to coordinate the interviews and talk to the different attorneys and the family members while you are in the courthouse. Brittany, as you know, being a reporter, sometimes it's hard to get people to speak on camera, especially if it's something really like sensitive like this.
Absolutely.
And if you do get them to speak, it's kind of an in the moment thing. So it makes it even harder when even if they say, yeah, I'll talk to you, but then you got to somehow wrangle them outside the building.
Yeah, yeah. And hope that they didn't change their mind.
And let me say this. I had planned to try to be one of the first people outside of the courtroom so that I could turn around and get interviews with people as they were coming out. Mr. Ferris's mom was in front of me. She was upset, and she left very quickly. Yeah, I was trying to be the first one out so we could get our video and stuff, but I mean, she beat me out, and it was her and one of his aunts. And there was, with her was a Caddo DA's, I guess like a victim's advocate kind of person.
Okay. Yeah.
And I approached her to see, hey, do you think the family want to say anything? And she's like, absolutely not. So and
difficult time for them right now. Yeah, I gotta.
Oh,
and that's sometimes we just have to, respect the family's wishes, let them grieve. But yeah, sorry, you had it.
No, and I can tell you that Chris's family was absolutely elated and overjoyed. When they announced not guilty on all counts, Chris just put his head down. I was looking at him from the back. It looked like there may have been some tears, but I couldn't tell you. But I know he was visibly emotional and put his head down. Some of his family members kind of got loud.
Wow.
They reminded them, hey, we're still in court. Can't do that. But outside the courthouse, his mom, we tried to talk to her, but she was on the phone with somebody, and she was just saying, I get to bring my baby home. So they were happy.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, like in moments like that, they like all forget where they are and just like the emotion of the situation overcomes. And actually, Lynn was able to get an exclusive, I heard a little bit from Chris as on his way out. So we're going to go ahead and take a listen to that.
Thank Jesus. We're excited. We're proud of the jury. Finally, a jury that had the courage to say that it's not guilty. Everybody in Shreveport is not guilty. And this system is flawed sometimes. We have poor investigations. In this case, it was a poor investigation that has affected Mr. Dewey's life since 2020. So I appreciate the courage of the community to say no, say not guilty.
So not guilty was the verdict, and you guys can see him walking home right there.
Yeah.
He's walking out. A few people surrounding him. And so what time, it looks really dark out there in that video. So what time did the jury come with their verdict, and was this all happened and took place?
Okay, so I'm just going to speculate on the last part.
Wait, we don't want to speculate.
Well, I don't know the exact time.
Okay, it's fine.
I know that we left as a news crew, we left at 9:30.
Okay. So you guys left at 9:30.
We left the courthouse at 9:30, and we pretty much left after we got those interviews. Now I can tell you that I got there that day at around 2 p.m. and we were there until 6:20.
It was a long day for you guys.
Yes. And hold on. I can tell you when I can look.
Okay.
But we're gonna be dramatic. I can tell you my phone when they texted.
Pull out the receipt.
Said that they had a verdict, so we could get a more.
Yes.
Okay, let's see. The actual verdict came down at 9:11 p.m. Now we were called back to court, told to come back at 8:50.
Okay.
So it was pretty quick.
That is,
it was pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, full disclosure, Miss Lynn had to go to the restroom, and when I came back, they had just started reading, and I was like, "Oh my God!" But I was there when they read it. But
she almost missed it.
It happened so fast. Yeah, it happened so fast, and yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, I mean, that's pretty much the full recap of your experience being there.
Mm-hmm.
That firsthand look. Would there be any last any last things that you maybe really stood out to you throughout the day yesterday, or even in the moments of reading the verdict? I mean, I know you kind of already described both the emotions on both sides of each family. Was there anything else that you think you'd like to point out?
The only thing that I will say is, with this being my first kind of court case to cover, I don't know if this was typical, but some of the law students were telling me that this was not typical. But the prosecuting attorneys came into the courtroom, sat down, set up their stuff, got up, took all their stuff, left. Came back 20 minutes later, sat down, got back up, left. Came back again. And I don't know if it was a delay because Chris was out on bail. So he was not detained in any way. And I don't know if it was a situation where they were having to wait for him or wait for the attorneys. I don't know the reason. I just know that was interesting for me, being a first-time person. Like, it took it a while to get started, to get underway.
Yeah.
There seemed like some delays.
Okay. Yeah, that's like another little interesting tidbit that nobody would know if you weren't there. But interesting. And it's very interesting that there were law students there too that just were intrigued in the trial.
Oh yeah, several law students. I don't know if this was like part of their assignment. I can tell you that the people in the courtroom made up family members. They made up just a couple of spectators who were curious because of who Chris was.
Mm-hmm.
They made up the law students, but they also made up, some of them were employees of the Alexander Wells law firm, which were representing, that was Chris's defense. Mm-hmm. Some of them were, one lady that sat beside me, she was a clerk there. Okay. So some of their employees were there watching. Mm-hmm. There were some employees from the district attorney's office there watching. Somebody in the courtroom made a comment to me. I can't remember which individual it was, but that there were several employees of these different entities there, because everybody, since who Chris was, everybody's trying to make sure everything's done by the book, mm-hmm. the way it's supposed to be done, mm-hmm. so that there couldn't be any,
Yeah, and just like as you said, when that verdict came out, from closing statements, that happened very quickly, and opening statements actually began on Wednesday, March 8th, and so this was about, almost a week-long trial. So we've seen even longer before. So, I mean, I would say that's kind of fairly quick.
They did say, Brittany, and of course I wasn't there for that. As you said, it started Wednesday. Mm-hmm. They did say that Chris did take the stand and he did testify. The prosecuting attorney, she did kind of point out, which was kind of interesting, that you saw Mr. Chris on the stand. He was defensive. He was combative, and she was like, that's the real Chris Dooley, it was kind of dramatic,
Yeah. Try to give the jury just one last tidbit on him. Alrighty. Well, I appreciate you, Lynn, for coming and giving us a breakdown of the trial, your experience there, and giving us an inside look of that courtroom. Again, as she has said, Chris was not guilty, said he was not by the jury. The jury found him not guilty for second-degree murder. So that is where things ended off there. And if more details come out about this, we will continue to follow it as a news station. And you can find that on ktalnews.com.
We want to remind the viewers also that no, we don't want to remind them of anything. I apologize.
Okay.
We're good.
All good?
We're
Okay.
good.
She said what she needed to say.
I'm good.
And so head on over to ktalnews.com for more details. You can always download the KTAL News Now app as well so that you can receive push notifications and that you never miss a beat. Thank you guys again so much for watching our live and hanging out with us. Hope you guys all have a great, safe rest of your day. See you next time.